Ahoy! My name is Alex, and for years I've been making videos for this channel, talking about stuff I'm really into and wanting to share with you, the viewer. When I decided to put some skin in the video making game, there's a series I wanted to talk about for quite a while, and that is Bioshock. That original title was one of my most memorable experiences in video games, and showed what this medium could be capable of. I booted up that game at least 10 different times, and I even tried recording a let's play that never made it on the internet, thank goodness. It was on a flip video camera, stabilized on a tripod with the help of duct tape. Yeah, I guess I'm a filmmaker, whatever. This series is something I wanted to get around to at some point, trusting that it would happen as I put other ideas at the forefront. But after a series of life events that hit like a truck, I figured there's no other time like the present. This is that video. However, there's an important distinction. While I'll be looking back at Bioshock 1, I will do so to contrast with Bioshock 2. Because when discussing the series, the original and Infinite are the games brought up in the conversation, while Bioshock 2 is left on the sidelines. Developed by 2K Martin rather than Irrational Games, the original creators, Bioshock 2 was reviewed with a solid score of 8 out of 10 and sold extremely well at first, before slowing down at around 4 million copies rather than the expected 5 million, and not held in the same pedigree as the others. However, as time marches on, I find myself reassessing what I value and what I like. For example, I used to be really into Bioshock Infinite when I first played it. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but that's a topic for another video. And that got me thinking, what about Bioshock 2? I played it in my early teens in a section in college that was fantastic. So I'm going back to Rapture. I want to go through Bioshock 1 and 2, talking about what I think works, what I think doesn't, and my overall thoughts on the games. And you're in luck, the bathysphere has room for one more. But before our journey properly begins, I want to give you a heads up on the trip itself. First, this video is going to be a smorgasbord of spoilers from Bioshock 1 and 2. If you don't want to be spoiled on either game, you're more than welcome to peace out, I totally get it. You can always come back when you're ready. After all, I'm just a video file. I'm not going anywhere. And second, I will be talking about the base game of Bioshock 1 and 2, so it's not going to include the combat-focused DLC or the multiplayer. All I ask of you, my dear viewer and fellow travel buddy, is to sit back and relax, grab a beverage or a snack if you're peckish, and enjoy the trip into yesteryear. Okay, with that out of the way, it looks like we're ready to rock and roll. Before we properly dive into Bioshock 2, I've got to set the stage for this video, and to do that, we need to start at the beginning, in that first visit to Rapture.
They told me, son, you're special. You were born to do great things. You know what? They were right.
In the freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean, you swim past the debris of the recently crashed plane, flames erupting on all sides. But further ahead, under the light of the full moon, a lone lighthouse beckons you forward. If you take a look on the horizon, you'll see nothing but the cold indifference of the ocean. You're alone, and this lighthouse is your best option. So you walk inside, past the large doors welcoming you in, and then they shut. The lights turn on one by one, revealing a statue and a banner draped below it, saying, "No gods or kings, only man." The plaque in front of you reads, "In what country is there a place for people like me?" Curiosity grabs hold of you. How couldn't it? So you travel further down, until you see a bathysphere. The lever glows, inviting you to come on in. Why don't you see what's in store? So you pull the lever and descend further into the depths of the sea, and as you do, a screen flies up and a projector begins. A virtual welcome into the city as that iconic speech begins.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture. A city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well.
Rapture is unlike anything you had ever seen before. An Art Deco metropolis that can fill the unprepared with awe. The glow in every window and the intensity in the neon lights say to you, this is Rapture, the impossible city. Welcome. But however great it appears, there's something off about this place. Two voices talk over the service radio on the bathysphere, saying to move quickly because the splicers are coming. A splicer? What's that? You may think as the bathysphere nears its destination. And when you dock into the city, you watch behind the glass as a man is gutted by a person, or what looks like one. She wields hooks and has excess skin protruding from her face, releasing a screech as your safety is called into question. She attacks your capsule, wires and the metal shelling torn from the top. In moments, she jumps down, tiring of this game, and walks off into the darkness. The service radio buzzes as a voice begins to speak.
I don't know how you survived that plane crash, but I've never been one to question Providence. I'm Atlas, and I aim to keep you alive.
You walk through the ruined state of the city. The voice on the other side of the line, Atlas, is a welcome addition. He's looking out for you, the poor soul who crash landed. Shown a few moments later when he sends a security bot to protect you from the woman from earlier. At Atlas's insistence, you grab a pipe wrench, and as you make your way through the ruined building, you come face to face with a splicer. Much like the woman, he seems more like a ghoul than a person. His clothes are soiled in dirt and blood. He lunges at you with a pipe as he cries out to be heard. Atlas can't save you this time, so you bash his face in with a wrench. Even after dealing with the splicer, there's a problem. The door leading to the next room is stuck. The door control has sparks shooting out. But then you hear a voice, not Atlas, but from the Gatherer's Garden vending machine, showcasing doodles in a serum and syringe untouched, labeled Electrobolt. Your options are looking pretty thin, so you take the machine up on its offer, leading to a rather solid moment of body horror.
Your genetic code is being rewritten. Just hold on and everything will be fine.
You wake up to two splicers standing over you, before being scared off by a hulking brute called a Big Daddy and a child known as a Little Sister. The pair share a rather tight bond that will end badly for anyone attempting to get in the way. Once you regain consciousness, you're given control once again, this time with Electrobolt, your first plasmid, which can be used to bypass the door's controls. So at the moment, you're trapped under the Atlantic Ocean with a bunch of whacked out splicers in a dystopian Art Deco city with no idea what's going on, armed with a wrench, a fistful of thunder, and a charming Irishman on the radio. That's your hook. Welcome to Rapture. Bioshock's opening level is such a good introduction to the game. It feels like a tour, showing you what to expect through the city and the game as a whole. While it's experienced through the character Jack, it's a tour made for you, like an amusement park ride or a haunted house with jaw-dropping beauty and scares that you can safely enjoy from behind the screen. And as the game goes on, moments where it does a real bang-up job about making you forget that. This is your introduction to Rapture, and the roughly first 30 minutes of the first level are used to show how the game works. And Bioshock works exceptionally well. When it released in 2007, it was met with critical acclaim. Even going on Metacritic today, it's ranked by users as one of the best PC games of all time, considered a must-play on the site. Of course, that doesn't mean it's perfect. There are plenty of problems with it that we'll get into, but there was a lot to like. And I want to hone in on the bits that made the game work. A lot of that is perceived through personal experience and speculation. One of the strongest bits that can still be felt to this day is the world of Rapture itself. The look of this place is insane. It was when I first played it at 14 years old, and it still is even when I did a recent playthrough 10 years later. There's a combination of factors that go into this. One layer is how Rapture's Art Deco art style is beautiful, featuring zigzagging flooring, geometric influences, and even in the unlikeliest of places, like a bathroom with its use of rectangles and diamond patterns in the middle. Or the use of loud colors in the neon signs scattered across the city, or gold lining the walls in places like Fort Frolic. The Art Deco style in Rapture adds to its original pitch of this grand utopia, unbound by the morality and practices of the modern world. This place was originally meant to be a haven for those who came here, a refuge for the artists and the visionaries under the sea. Just imagine what this place would have been like back in the day, when the golds were more striking and the look was pristine. There would still have been problems, but man, it sure would have been a breathtaking facade. And that's where the second layer of the atmosphere comes into play. While there are moments of regal beauty in the city, that's the exception, not the norm. Because when we visit Rapture, it's in the aftermath of a conflict that ravaged the city. We only get here when it's been torn apart. The floors are riddled with rubble and concrete, or flooded with freezing cold water. The walls have grime caked on that wouldn't pass a health inspection, in addition to the mutilated corpses that get pillaged by splicers or prodded by little sisters. That ruin and decay is shown to great effect throughout the city, but places like Neptune's Bounty hammer this home. Leaks are seen through the place, and when considering this was where a lot of the blue-collar workers were stationed, it paints a grim picture. And that example leads me into what I speculate to be why the original Bioshock is so well remembered. Bioshock didn't do one particular aspect of the game perfectly, but rather did a solid job on a lot of different fronts that complemented the game and made this initial visit to Rapture a better experience overall. I already talked about the visuals, but in addition to the look, it's how you experience the city that makes it so captivating. While you're walking through the spaces of Rapture, you could see bits of environmental storytelling. Small moments like a couple on date night to the monologue of characters through their audio logs. In viewing Rapture like this, it makes you feel like a detective. There's the straightforward narrative of teaming up with Atlas to rescue his family, but at the same time, there's this secondary narrative of why. How did this beautiful city end up in this state? In that latter type, you're exploring the city, searching every nook and cranny until you stitch together a story that checks out. And while you're piecing together this tale, you're gonna run into the denizens of this decaying metropolis, splicers. At first glance, a splicer seems like a standard grunt enemy type, expressed as, "Whoa, these people want to fight me, I guess I better shoot them in the face, pew pew." While there's some truth to that, there's also something really sad about them too. Splicers are what's left of the inhabitants of Rapture, their minds and bodies corrupted by the substance known as Adam. This was one of the crowning achievements of the city back in its heyday. Collected from slugs at the bottom of the sea, this viscous liquid can be harnessed to modify people's genetic makeup. Dr. Steinman, a cosmic surgeon in the medical wing, talks excitedly about the potential of this stuff.
But Adam gives us the means to do it. And Ryan frees us from the phony ethics that held us back. Change your look, change your sex, change your race. It's yours to change. Nobody else's.
What makes this such a tragic development is that Steinman has a point. Shouldn't it be up to the individual to create their own identity? The body is a canvas, and with Adam, it allows the user to shape it however they please. I think that's a universal desire to embody the version of yourself that's you. But even before the downsides that will eventually come up, think about the negatives already. Rapture is a city built as a temple to the innovator, the pioneers who will push mankind into an age of advancement and discovery. With such an ideal like that, it's easy to think that the one who will pull the great chain and be seen as the guy could be you. The character of Andrew Ryan and his perspective is heavily influenced by the author Ayn Rand and her philosophy, objectivism. I'm having a tough time fully articulating this as I'm not much of a philosophy guy, but there's this show called Party Down, and a character asks someone if they heard of Ayn Rand, and another responds, the author who wrote about how awesome people are? And what's funny about that line is that's exactly what I got from her work. I read Atlas Shrugged a few years ago, and for the first 200 pages, I was hooked. It had this mystery of where the greatest minds in the world left, and the leading characters seemed flawed but interesting. But as the book went along, I started to look more into the novel's discussion, and the sentiment that the book was a vehicle for Rand's philosophy, where the flawed characters weren't actually flawed, they were the heroes. People who were better because they saw the world in a pure, rational way, and anyone who wasn't that person was wrong and immoral really sunk in. It took a lot of the fun and the mystery for me, but the reason I bring up Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged is for another comparison. In the book, it's revealed that all the greatest minds in the world have congregated to a secret location called Galt's Gulch, a valley where they pursue their personal projects until the world admits how much it needs them. In the book, everyone a part of the community is totally on board for this idea. Rapture is an inverse of Galt's Gulch, because the ideal was to be the place to push the bounds. But who are the ones who get to push them? And if you were a civilian of Rapture, would you still wholeheartedly believe in Ryan's and Rand's outlook, even when you realize you wouldn't be one of the shapers of humanity? An audio log of the late Frank Fontaine says this well.
These sad saps. They come to Rapture thinking they're gonna be captains of industry. But they all forget that somebody's gotta scrub the toilets.
That is the circumstance the people of Rapture are stuck in. Their trust placed in the Great Chain, working with their own self-interest in mind, and trapped in a position where advancement is looking bleak. But in that self-interest, here's this genetic material that can let you change anything about yourself. And here's a poster from the medical wing that says aesthetics are a moral imperative. Add on top of this the invention of plasmids, which can be used to do the equivalent of superpowers. Shooting lightning out of your hands, snapping your fingers to light a cigarette for an interested party, or even throwing things with your mind. And the choice to try this stuff out is an understandable one. But the sucky part about Adam is that it's highly addictive, as mentioned by Dr. Tenenbaum.
Adam acts like a benign cancer, destroying native cells and replacing them with unstable stem versions. While this very instability is what gives it its amazing properties, it is also what causes the cosmetic and mental damage. You need more and more Adam just to keep back the tide. From a medical standpoint, this is catastrophic. From a business standpoint, well, Fontaine sees the possibilities.
And that's what I find compelling about splicers as opponents, because while they function as the main enemy type, narratively, you're fighting addicts. Their face and minds are twisted by their compulsion for more Adam, with pheromones shot in the air so they dance to Ryan's tune. They cry out for someone to talk to them or to clean up while they fight you. It adds to the melancholy that they used to be regular people, and this is what their city has done to them. Splicers come in a variety of types. They aren't necessarily coordinated, rather just running at you, but sometimes they offer surprises. From the Nitro that throw bombs at you to the Spider, bearing hooks to claw on the walls, using verticality as a way to get an advantage, to the Houdini Splicers, enemies who can teleport around and throw fire at you. Their introduction is pretty spooky. In fact, Bioshock does a really good job at making you feel at the mercy of the Splicers. This game was one of my first tastes of horror, and some of the sequences are really solid. For example, I want to mention one of my favorites that takes place in the medical wing. It's the moment when you get the shotgun. So as you walk to the lower level, you find on your right a corpse and a shotgun with 2 boxes of ammo. Oh, sick! So you walk over and grab it. What could possibly go wrong? Bioshock creates moments that suggest while you're sitting behind the screen, in the eyes of the remaining populace, you're an interloper, and they're going to let you know that in ways that aren't considered proper. The use of the first-person camera really nails the immersive aspect and the feeling that while Jack is a player character, besides his opening lines, he doesn't have much to say. He's a vehicle to view what remains. But your hands aren't clean either. Besides the splicers, you also partake in the Rapture economy. I love plasmids in this game because besides being cool magic-like powers for the player to use, it also adds to the game's setting. The initial plasmid use is a solid take on body horror, bones snapping as your hands transform before your very eyes, with blue streaks of lightning through your veins. Jack groans and screams as his genetic code is rewritten, and even how to get this, the user has to forcefully inject it into their bloodstream. Whenever you get an Eve Hypo, a consumable to recharge your bar used for plasmids, every single time you inject the syringe into your arm, you hear the squish of the needle and the muscles contracting as the substance oozes out of the hypo. With first aid kits, you press a button and it's instantaneous. But with Eve, you have to watch this animation every single time. And that's another cool part, your hands show the effect of the plasmid. We already talked about Electro Bolt, but take something like Insect Swarm. Your hand breaks out in hives as bees swarm around it. Or Security Bullseye. This plasmid lets you tag enemies to be caught by security cameras to sick the mechanical law enforcement on opponents. Your hand has this organic glob of blue liquid and tadpoles flying around and blue-covered boils scattered about. And even something that isn't physically grotesque, like telekinesis. It looks like your regular hand with a slight shimmering around it, conveying this ability's force, but in a way that appears unassuming at first glance. Stuff like this can be pretty gross, but I find it fascinating because it shows a visible effect of partaking in abilities like this. The destruction that occurs on your body reminds you this is not ideal. Yeah, you can shoot fire at opponents, but look at your hands, dude, those are at least third-degree burns. It also makes it clear through gameplay and animation that Rapture changes people, as it has already changed you. But those changes may not be all doom and gloom, they can at least keep you alive. Bioshock plays like a first-person shooter, so you'll be shooting quite a bunch of stuff. But what makes this gameplay a blast to play even years later is how the game gives you plenty of tools to accomplish your tasks. Take your arsenal, for example. There's the classic stuff, a pistol, a machine gun that's a Tommy gun, a shotgun, a crossbow, and a trusty melee weapon. But then the game will throw in some crazy stuff, like a homemade grenade launcher, a chemical thrower, and a research camera. While it doesn't do damage, it allows you to act like a paparazzi and take photos of opponents in 1080p, which grants abilities that will make you stronger. What makes the arsenal in this game really memorable is that most of the weapons will have additional ammo types. So if we look at the pistol, for example, there's the regular bullets, the anti-personal that are really effective against splicers, and armor piercing, great against machines and armored foes. And these additional ammo types can shake things up too. The grenade launcher can lob regular grenades, proximity mines that explode when stepped on, and heat-sinking missiles. Meanwhile, the chemical thrower can hurl fire, nitrogen can freeze targets, and electric gel can shock. One of my favorite moments in a recent playthrough, I was ambushed by a group of splicers in Fort Frolic, so I loaded up my crossbow and shot the trap bolt, creating a tripwire enemies would walk into reaching me. And it felt so sick when it worked out, making me feel like a resourceful survivor who reversed the power dynamic. It was awesome. Besides your standard armory, plasmids allow an additional layer of choice, because in addition to their original use, you can get creative with them too. An early example is the Electro Bolt. You can use it to open doors and stun splicers, but it can also be used to halt the machines like turrets, security bots, and even cameras for a few seconds, which can be used to get some distance or hack into them. Or, if you find enemies in water, you can shoot it to electrify the water, doing some great damage to groups. Or Incinerate, which can melt ice, light a path of oil with fire, or lead into a combo. If you light a splicer on fire and there's water nearby, they'll throw themselves in, which can be followed up with an Electro Bolt, and that's all she wrote. Telekinesis is a fun one, which can be used to grab and throw objects, from items like a splicer's mask, mid-air grenades from nitros, to even corpses. This plasmid can also grab objects from another room if you've got a line of sight and there's a hole for it to go through. One of my favorite combos is shooting a corpse with a proximity mine, then using telekinesis to grab a hold of it and lob it at an opponent. Morbid? Most certainly. But effective? Absolutely. There are other plasmids that have straightforward uses. Enrage, which gets people pissed off. The DLC Sonic Boom, which just knocks everything in front of you back. Decoy, which makes a decoy. But my point is that combined with the weapons you have in the plasmids, in addition to tonics that give buffs to your character in different situations, while you feel like an underdog fighting through the streets of the city, it allows a sense of control and feel almost like a sandbox. What gets a bit annoying is having to manually swap between weapons and plasmids. This puts a delay on the fun you can have with your makeshift strategies. It's still possible, but it slows down the gameplay, which I have a difficult time spinning as a positive aspect. But in spite of that, every time I play this game, I found something new about it, like you can use the electro buck from the shotgun to bypass door controls, or you can destroy health stations, preventing splicers to heal up mid-combat. And you're gonna need to get creative when fighting one of the most iconic designs in the series, the Big Daddies. These fine fellows were once regular humans that eventually became heavily spliced up, strapped into a diving suit, and were conditioned to protect the Little Sisters. And it's the Little Sisters that are crucial in these conflicts. They were once regular girls, but remember those sea slugs I mentioned that were the providers of Adam? Well, there's this lady named Dr. Tenenbaum. She was the geneticist who was in charge of the Adam developments. She was working with this guy named Frank Fontaine, and tests revealed that if you embed the sea slug in a host, it can create more Adam. She and Fontaine discovered that young girls were the perfect hosts for the slugs. So, out of the goodness of his heart, Fontaine opens up the Little Sister Orphanage, a refuge where girls who either had no one to look after them or parents who couldn't afford them could be taken in, promised by a better future. But as we'll get into later, Fontaine is actually not a very nice guy, and the orphanage was a front to get hosts for the sea slugs. Years later, Tenenbaum would regret this discovery and has been working to reverse its effects. But for everybody else, finding a little sister is hitting the Adam jackpot, whether it's the splicers or yourself. That's where the Big Daddies come in, because to get more plasmids and upgrade yourself, you need Adam. In order to get that Adam, you need the Little Sisters. But to get to them, you need to take out a Big Daddy. And these guys can hit like a truck. They have a large drill on their arm and can move quickly. Their steps cause the ground to shake. However, unlike the other enemy types in the game, these guys only attack you if you strike first or if you get too close to a little sister. And if you decide to fight them, the fight can be on your terms. You can prepare for combat in whatever way you need, swapping ammo types, setting traps, or wearing down the Big Daddy with other enemies. That's up to you. And when you defeat the Big Daddy, you have choice on how to handle the little sister. You can either harvest, remove the slug embedded in her, getting the most amount of Adam for it. However, the child will not survive the process. Or instead, using an experimental plasmid from Tenenbaum and rescue the little sister, reversing the effects of the sea slug and returning her back to normal. While you can get a small amount of Adam in the process, if you do this enough, you'll be rewarded with care packages as thanks for being you. It's cool that the game gives you a choice on how to handle the little sisters, as it will affect which of the two endings you get, but it also doesn't cut quite as deeply as the moral quandary is presented as, because the total number you get from rescuing, if you account for the teddy bears, in comparison to the harvesting are really close to even. What the choice boils down to is, do you want Adam right now, or would you like it later? And since I'm talking about the negative aspects of the first game, I want to bring up another part. It's been a few years since I played Bioshock again, and I forgot how much hacking was in it. I must have repressed it in my genetic code or something. If you want to hack anything, turrets, security bots, cameras, vending machines, anything, you'll be doing the minigame. You simply gotta connect the pipes to make sure they flow to the end goal. If you can pull this off, you've done it. My slight peeve is how often you have to do this, because it's a lot and it takes a while. However, I also forgot there are other options. Maybe it's just me getting older, but I don't have the patience to play this minigame all the time. So I hoard all my money so I can pay the Rapture microtransaction and the machine will do it for me. And my last critique for that first time in Rapture is how the game builds up to its final moments. So if you've played Bioshock, you know about the twist. It's one of the most iconic in the medium, where the game flips its premise on its head and may have you go, no way! I knew about the twist when playing it for the first time, and I was so impressed with how the game would put subtle nods to it before it all clicked into place. Bioshock 1 functions like a roller coaster, getting better and better as the game goes along. From the tutorial section to the medical wing, Neptune's bounty, Smuggler's hideout, Arcadia and the farmer's market, Fort Frolic, which is just fantastic. And then we get to Hephaestus, the beating heart of the city. But along the way, we've been piecing together a narrative of the fall of Rapture. There were two power players back in its heyday, Andrew Ryan, the city's creator, and Frank Fontaine. Andrew acted in a way you would expect, putting the ideals of the city above its civilians and trusting in the direction of the market, only associating with those who share that same vision. But Fontaine was different. You see, he was a con man, a scoundrel, and not the endearing kind. His plan wasn't to go up against Ryan in his own game. Instead, he would fill the niche that Ryan's actions would open. Ryan believes that charity is a way of the parasite. Well, buddy, old Fontaine is looking out for ya. So he created Fontaine's Helping Hands, offering two needs in Rapture. The first was Fontaine's Home for the Poor, offering food and shelter to those who couldn't afford the economic policies Ryan created. And the second was the already mentioned Little Sister Orphanage. And this was a clever move by Fontaine, because on the surface, this was a huge support boost for a large group of people in Rapture. It showed that Fontaine was one of them, a little guy sticking it to the man, even with all the influence he had. He was using it to help his fellow man, and that was something they could get behind. But if you look deeper, this was the thing that secured Fontaine's power. Because with the Home for the Poor, what he got was more than goodwill, but loyalty. The disenfranchised civilians became his soldiers against Ryan, and thinking back on objectivism, there are very few who would qualify as great in that philosophy's eyes, and Fontaine used the power of the many to make him a force to be reckoned with. When those people were ready to fight, Fontaine would outfit them to do his bidding, plasmids courtesy of Fontaine Futuristics, and you know exactly where he got the atom to mass produce those products. When Ryan caught wind of Fontaine's criminal actions, their forces had a shootout, resulting in the death of Fontaine. But rather than everything going back to normal, people began to question how much power Ryan should have in the first place, especially so when he nationalized Fontaine Futuristics. For those who don't know what nationalized mean, don't worry, neither did I. It's when you transfer the rights of something to a private or state ownership. And that doesn't seem like a very objectivist thing to do. That sounds like you're stealing work of another person. In other words, something a parasite would do. And this was the nail in the coffin for Ryan. Then along comes this guy named Atlas, a champion for the regular person, a revolutionary looking out for the little guy. And this was the beginning of the end. In the audio logs, Fontaine is fascinating, he's interesting, clever, and a damn good villain. And the realization that you've been doing his dirty work the whole time, killing Andrew Ryan and handing him control of the city, is masterfully done. And when it's revealed that Atlas was none other than Frank Fontaine, and you've been created to be his ace in the hole, made from the DNA of Andrew Ryan and Jasmine Jolie, Ryan's favorite girl, allowing you access to the city no one else would have, and being controlled to hijack the plane at the start of the game, crash landing you exactly where you need to be, it's a powerful twist that makes you feel played. And it's at this moment where the game peaks. It reaches its crescendo, and right when everything is shocking and perfect, the game keeps going. What follows is the game trying to tie everything up that I don't think captures the same magic as it did before. I think this comes to 2 points. The first is the implications of the twist. I've heard people say the twist is a meta-commentary on games, how ultimately in a narrative-focused game, we lack free will. And when Fontaine pulls the rug from under us, not just Jack, but you are affected by it too. How the game is being self-aware with its lack of control and works it into the story. I used to be really gung-ho about this idea for a while, but this replay made me start to push back against it. Because once that self-awareness is known, the game goes back to doing the same thing with a different person you take orders from. While I was recording footage for my playthrough, I felt pretty cheeky and wrote this little note after I got rid of the genetic mind control affecting Jack, and I'd like to read it to you. At last, I'm free! For my next order of business, I'm going to do everything Dr. Tenenbaum asks of me. Looking back, it's a pretty silly comment, but I also think it highlights the clash that takes a lot of the mechanical punch out of the twist. The in-game narrative stuff is awesome, I still enjoy that immensely. but the progression that you started the game doing the actions of one person, only to reveal you were being played, and then immediately do the same thing for another is a bit of a downer. Dr. Tenenbaum is a fascinating character, but this transition is not wholly satisfying. Neither is Fontaine chatting to you over the radio. In the accounts of others, the game paints Fontaine as this cunning and heartless monster. Even his audio logs achieve this too. It feels like you're getting this intimate perspective where he fully recognizes the monster he is, and how he feels no remorse about it. Then at the tail end of the game, he'll keep calling you, saying anything off the top of his head, and it just deflates this imposing character that was the boogeyman of Rapture. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the character was made to be revealed as this small and kind of pathetic ghoul, that he only drops the act in the ruins of this city he tried to obtain, only now you get to see him as the monster he really is. If that's the case, okay, that's pretty solid. Anyway, what follows is the plot wrapping itself up as you become a big daddy, but not a full one, which doesn't feel quite as interesting as the concept sounds. Follow a little sister around as she opens doors for you, making the occasional pit stop for Adam, then having a final boss fight with the spliced up Fontaine. And hey, it's that one guy. I understood that reference. So you whoop Fontaine and the game goes into one of its two endings depending on if you've harvested or rescued the little sisters. And with that, the original Bioshock comes to its conclusion. Coming back to the game years later, while I find myself better articulate with my problems with it, I also have a newfound respect as well. Bioshock is able to weave in expressive gameplay, rich atmosphere, world design, and a story that certainly kept me invested even near the end. And for a game that was released over 16 years ago in 2007, that's insane. Whatever your thoughts on that original title, I hope I was able to articulate what I found so compelling about it, and set a solid foundation of comparison for the sequel. And with that, we're finally able to dive into Bioshock 2, and it only took... oh, jeez. Well, buckle up. 2K Games were in a difficult position. How are you meant to follow up the original Bioshock, a game that's considered one of the best of all time? In 2010, they responded with Bioshock 2. After doing a playthrough to refresh my perspective on the game, here's my overall thoughts I'll be expanding on in this video. I think Bioshock 2 is a game that significantly improved the original's gameplay. While I prefer the narrative of the first, I believe 2 has enough ideas and concepts that it should be considered a wonderful game in its own right rather than cast in its forebear's shadow. I can understand the perspective that Bioshock 2 is more of the same, but in this section, I'm going to try my best to explain why I think otherwise. To kick this off, let's look at the first moments when you boot up a new game. Starting in 1958, a year before the New Year's attacks, we see through the eyes of Subject Delta, one of the prototype Big Daddies waiting for his little sister, Eleanor. In this short sequence, besides encapsulating the relationship between the two, we get a glimpse of the rapture of the past. The civilians garbed in masks out of choice and not of shame, the bright golds and the old tunes with no thematic irony behind them. But that joy of the past fades when Eleanor cries out, surrounded by splicers. Delta is an absolute unit and deals with them no problem. Until right near the end, one throws a hypnotized glob at Delta, pacifying him. Just then, a figure steps out. A woman we will come to know as Sophia Lamb. She states her claim of Eleanor as she issues you a series of orders, culminating in taking a pistol, placing it to your head, and pulling the trigger. Welcome to Bioshock 2. We get our title card, looking similar to the first, but barnacles grown onto it. That creative choice is further supported as the game jumps forward 10 years. We regain consciousness in 1968 at the Adonis Luxury Resort. A voice calls out as you awake. It's hard to make out. Best walk around to get our bearings. That's one of the immediately cool things Bioshock 2 does. By pushing the clock further, it conveys the passage of time in Rapture, how the city is pushing past the decay we had seen before, with the ecosystem itself forming around it. From barnacles on the diver's helmet in the loading screens to physical roadblocks in this tutorial, like this pink coral you need to break to proceed through the resort. And because you're playing a Big Daddy, the first weapon is your trusty drill, able to do regular swings, and if you hold down the button, drill into opponents using fuel, making the first splicer you come across an absolute cakewalk. Just a bit further in the resort, at a gatherer's garden, it seems Eleanor hasn't forgotten about us. A token of her support wrapped in a bow, our first tried and true plasmid, Electrobolt. And before I say anything else, check out this scene. What I appreciate about them doing the first plasmid scene again is the distinction if we compare it to the original with Jack. In the first game, it's some strong body horror. The way a regular pair of hands spasm as the lightning courses through, and the shock of it— wait, is that a pun? It's not very good. And the shock of it is so intense, Jack freaks out and throws himself off the balcony. Meanwhile, Subject Delta is crying out under his helmet, conveying the pain of the process, but he keeps himself conscious during it, which offers a different flavor for our protagonist. When you inject a plasmid in Bioshock 1, it's presented as this terrifying event. In Bioshock 2, it's got a feeling of, alright, here we go again. After the plasmid, a little sister tells us to search for Eleanor, before a figure swoops up the child and books it through the resort. And it's when we get up that another difference between our protagonists is revealed. Subject Delta can dual-wield. This is one of those mechanical improvements from the original. You've got plasmids in your left hand and weapons on your right, making it easier to pull off combos in fights. Rather than having to open a menu to swap from your plasmid to a weapon, it's streamlined and more like boom, bam, thank you ma'am, having the gameplay a lot more fluid, which I certainly appreciate. When we get the power on, the voice from earlier sends us a message. It's Dr. Tenenbaum. She wants our help and suggests we meet her at the Atlantic Express station. And we can find out what brings her back to Rapture in an audio log near this photo. A picture of Rapture's Greatest in 1952, featuring Dr. Tenenbaum, Andrew Ryan, Sander Cohen, Dr. Sue Chung, Sophia Lamb, and a man we'll be talking about later on, Gilbert Alexander. Someone's rumored to be capturing children to make new little sisters, so the doctor has come back to right the wrongs she started all those years ago. And it's a mistake that certainly needs to be corrected, because in the grand foyer, a little sister draws Adam from the corpse of a splicer. But we're not alone.
Daddy, big sister doesn't want you playing with me.
This is a big sister, the leftover of one of those poor girls whose mental conditioning drove them mad. They're agile, spliced up with plasmids, and really tanky. She guns it after trading a few blows, and when you chase after her, we end up right where she wants you. Being a big daddy's got its perks. One of them is walking through the seafloor without fear of drowning. And there's something so strange about walking outside of Rapture, staring at the inhabitants on the other side of the glass. It's almost like seeing an earlier version of yourself. There was a first time when you tried this game out and you walked through those buildings. You lived part of your life through Rapture. And here you are, traveling outside of the path of that first game. You even get another grand showcase of the city. But it's not the same. The music fades, Delta grunts when he drops down to the lower levels of the seafloor. His steps and the bubbles pushing towards the surface from the machines can be heard as you trudge through the Atlantic Ocean. The moments of walking through Rapture's exterior are some of my favorites in the game. It feels so strange viewing Rapture outside of where it was originally intended. It's like clipping through a map in a video game you cherish and seeing what the camera would never intentionally show you. It's sad in seeing it like this, noticing the cold indifference of the sea from this relic of another time. A beacon of someone's hopes and dreams, however flawed, met with the oppressive force of reality. Oh man, what am I doing? Sorry about that. Let's just keep on chugging. Past the airlock, we arrive at the maintenance station. And just a few moments in, we find a vast improvement from the first game. On a desk is a hack tool. When we grab it, you'll notice the viewing glass is broken, and the door's controls are on the other side. So you shoot a remote hack dart and... they did it. Those rascals actually did it. They made hacking fun. As you saw in the first game, the hacking was a bit slow, and even if you're good at the pipe minigame, it took its sweet time before you could complete it. As an example, here's how long it took for the original hacking minigame. The speed of it, and how frequently that game allows you to hack, led to a lot of my playthrough just buying out machines or blowing them up. Now compare that to Bioshock 2's. Sick. It's faster, more engaging, even rewarding skillful play. The goal is to land the arrow on the green tiles enough times. However, if you're hacking something like a vending machine and see a thinner blue tile, landing on those will have the machine also drop some free supplies. There's a countdown for this, adding some tension to move quickly. But if you land on a red tile, it triggers security to come attack you. But if you can frantically hack the machine again and succeed, then they peace out and everything is fine. It takes more time to explain this than actually doing it, which is great. The game feels like there's just as much, if not more hacking than the original, so this minigame makes it feel more quick. Even for harder hacks, you can get into this rhythm when hitting the button, which feels pretty surreal if you pay attention to it. There's also ammo types for the hack dart later on that just automatically hack into anything you shoot it at, which feels like a more engaging way of using the auto hack tool as you still have to aim it. Atlantis Station acts like a narrative foundation for the rest of the game. It starts building up your relationship to Sophia Lamb and explains the overarching goal for the game. Sophia Lamb is a fascinating villain. Where Andrew Ryan was a man dedicated to individual whims as they pull the great chain, Lamb is an advocate for the common good. A psychologist welcomed into Rapture to provide relief for its citizens. The fact she's your main adversary should be a strong indicator that she didn't stop there, but I'll explain more about her when it feels appropriate. What I will say now is that Eleanor is her biological daughter, and she's got a bone to pick with you for trying to get to her. And this is framed in a straightforward way. Eleanor is certainly waiting for you, having gifts scattered across the Atlantic Express route for you to pick up, like our next plasmid, telekinesis. But as Tenenbaum also explains it, you need to find Eleanor for your survival as well. As one of the original Big Daddy models, the Alpha series are different from the others you've seen in Bioshock 1. Their organs and skin aren't welded into their suits and can take off their helmets, which you saw at the beginning of the game. But the big thing is their pair bond with their little sister. If they wander too far from them, or their heart stops, their body begins to shut down and the effects are fatal. This was dropped in future creations as once a little sister was harvested or dealt with, the Alpha model would be useless from then on. For the sake of self-preservation, you need to reach Eleanor in Fontaine Futuristics, or you die. It's as subtle as a drill to the face, but it might just get the job done. After an ambush from Sophia's family, Tenenbaum has to leave with the little ones she's rescued. She hands the reins of our guidance to one Augustus Sinclair, a man who's got an interest in Fontaine's place as well. Sinclair is quite the guy. He talks to you like a buddy, speaking with a southern drawl that's personable. He's with you most of the journey, but there's a contrast to him that adds some complexity. He shares a similar role to Atlas in the first game, the friendly voice on the radio, helping you navigate through the city. Atlas was a fiction, a persona to lure you in and do Fontaine's bidding. There was no sincerity in him, even his accent was a lie. Meanwhile, Sinclair is straightforward in his approach. He admits he's helping to help himself, wanting to sell the advanced technology of Rapture back to the surface. If he makes a deal, he'll stick to it. An admirable trait. But the complexity is how that doesn't mean his hands are clean. Back in the day, Sinclair was an outstanding entrepreneur, owning a variety of businesses and services that Rapture depended on, like the Persephone Detention Facility, housing the people considered a danger to Rapture in the eyes of Andrew Ryan. One of these examples to turn a profit was renting out prisoners to be experimented on for both Fontaine and Ryan's businesses, which also contributed to the original Alpha series being created in the first place. Sinclair's an opportunist. He's quite likable as a person, but is more than happy to be a problem solver as long as he holds a wad of cash at the end of the day. He did the exact thing for Andrew Ryan, who despised him, but was useful enough to be a close business associate. More examples include Sinclair hiring cheap labor in the poorest neighborhood Pauper's Drop. putting together a mass quantity of toys at half the cost of the original's creation, making products with needles sticking out that the shopkeepers would turn a blind eye to in the name of financial gain, and even profiting from both sides of the Rapture Civil War with Sinclair Solutions' Customer Rewards program, sending care packages to the civilians of Rapture and the chance to test out his products, like plasmids and gene tonics against the other side. Augustus Sinclair is on your side, but with information of his past, you don't quite trust him, and in different circumstances, he might just turn you over with a smile as he pockets a check. The goal is to make our way to Ryan Amusements, but once inside, the railway is iced over, and the only way to progress further will be with the plasmid Incinerate. So we find ourselves a ticket and explore the level. This place is Andrew Ryan's take on an amusement park, featuring Rapture's own It's a Small World ride called Journey to the Surface. But the route is blocked with debris, the cart's stuck, and the mechanical actors are looking a bit rough. However, world building wise, it's interesting to see how civilians are conditioned to see the outside world. Think about Andrew Ryan's speech when you first entered the city, but more of a general audience attraction, with families and couples going, "Oh my," and "Look honey, that parasite stole their child for war." It's pretty surreal. It also features some lore in how the city was founded and created in the first place, which had me going, "Ah, so that's how they did it. Interesting." But one of the most important things to happen in this area is the game's introduction of the Little Sister mechanic. In order to obtain Incinerate, we need to buy it with Adam as our currency, and I think you know where this is going. We've got a tango with a Big Daddy. These guys are pretty tough, but can also be stunned with Electro Bolt to buy a few moments of time. And thanks to the machine gun we picked up while getting the ticket, our victory is assured. With Little Sisters, we have a choice of harvesting, or a new option, adopt. With this choice, you can lead a little sister to certain corpses on the map, place her down on the ground, and enter a defense mission where you have to protect her while she gathers, allowing you to gather more Adam if you're willing to make the time for it. Much like in Bioshock 1, however you deal with the little sisters will affect the game's ending, but there's some additional nuances to it I'll explain when the time comes. When reading through the wiki page, 2K talked about how they wanted the player to grow more of an emotional attachment to the little sisters, offering a gameplay motivation to get attached. While I can't say I grew attached to a strong degree, the adopt option did make me consider getting more Adam by harvesting. However, it's in this option that shows one of my initial critiques of the game. The Adam defense missions are alright, but feel repetitive after the first couple, having to gather 2 corpses of Adam for each little sister. And in the later levels, there are about 3 on the map. I remember that from my first playthrough and was cautious about that. But after doing a few tests, it turns out you don't actually have to do them. And I don't mean just harvesting. The cycle goes that you find 2 corpses, then walk over to a vent, drop them off and rescue them. However, as soon as you adopt one, you can just walk over to the vent and click the rescue button. You won't get as much Adam as you would with the other options, but you can still get the care packages after saving 3. It's an option, and I'm surprised the game doesn't tell you about it. Some reviews talk about the repetitive nature of the Little Sister defense missions as a turnoff, but if it was more transparent to the player that it's a possibility to discard that mechanic, I could see reviewers looking more favorably towards the game. So we get ourselves the Incinerate plasmid, and as we make our way to the railway, someone wants to see us off. For the rest of the game, whenever Delta deals with all the little sisters on the map, a big sister will hunt you down. The game even builds up the anticipation before the fight, giving you a few seconds to get yourself ready before she deals with you. A fun inverse from the Big Daddy fights. In those, you're fighting on your terms. With these, you're making the best of the few moments presented. With the big sister dealt with, we can melt the ice blocking the railway, get a glimpse of Sinclair with an interesting detail that he looks more like a regular human than a splicer like most of the city's inhabitants. And with that, we head to Pauper's Drop, what I would consider one of the most interesting levels in the game. As mentioned in Sinclair's audio log, Pauper's Drop is considered one of the worst neighborhoods in Rapture, originally created to act as a flophouse for the rail crew, but turned into long-term housing for the poorer civilians of Rapture. The level has you ascending vertically through the ruined apartments, stepping on plywood walkways, and seeing the level from high above. A cool change of pace from the previous level's horizontal layout. This place is also the reintroduction to the research camera. In the first game, you could spam taking photos until max research has been reached. Meanwhile, in Bioshock 2, the camera has been utilized with more variety in mind. Rather than taking a photo, you start recording while fighting an enemy, and if you get enough points, you get an upgrade. The game will rank how you deal with an enemy with variety in mind. So rather than just smacking with the drill, maybe you throw an electro bolt, shoot a few rivets, and then use the drill for a coup de grace. It encourages experimentation in dealing with enemies, and with the addition to dual wield, it makes it easier to get creative with opponents. But besides the level design and mechanics, what this level also shows is the human moments of Rapture. In the original, the characters you met were used to convey the big picture. Peach Wilkins was a representation of the blue-collar workers who were trapped by Frank Fontaine. Dr. Steinman was an example of how Adam twisted the inhabitants of the city, revealing that when there were no limitations, reality was an afterthought that should be discarded. Langford and Cohen showed how the motivation of self-interest was the only thing really holding them together once the city collapsed. But the leader of Pauper's Drop, Grace Holloway, is different. Back in the day, Grace was a jazz singer, hoping to put food on the table with her voice and make enough to start a family. But living in Rapture revealed the hypocrisy of the big names in the city, how true innovators and the greatest minds meant nothing without the support of the lower class making it possible. This was a sentiment she imbued in her art. So she rebelled through song, she blasted Ryan, and naturally, being the very cool guy he is, decided to silence her voice by blacklisting her from all the clubs and forcing her into Pauper's Drop. And with the disappearance of her partner and the knowledge she was unable to make children, things were looking grim. Until she met with the psychologist Sophia Lamb, who offered her the family she always wanted, cobbling together the broken pieces and fitting them into a mold that would satisfy her. When Sophia was arrested by Andrew Ryan, her daughter Eleanor was placed in Grace's care. And for all the city took, things were looking good. She looked after Eleanor the best she could. You can walk through her room and see she really cared for Eleanor. But then one day in Dionysus Park, Eleanor disappeared. And this is where the conflict of this level gets interesting. When you enter the neighborhood, Grace talks to you with a seething hatred. She despises Subject Delta, calling him Tin Daddy, and will do anything to make sure you fail. But if you fight through all the splicers, near the tail end of the level, you get a moment with Grace. In those 10 years, Subject Delta doesn't remember her, but she sure remembers you. Years ago, Eleanor suddenly showed back up at Rapture, but she didn't look like herself. She looked like a little sister. Grace, excited to see Eleanor again, stepped closer to hold her, the girl she saw as a daughter who was finally returned. And then Subject Delta saw this woman walking towards Eleanor. Context didn't matter. Someone was going to hurt his little sister. He slammed Grace into the ground, breaking her jaw. When she sees you, she sees a monster, not just as someone who hurt her, but who stole Eleanor and made her what she is. And in this room, you have a choice. In addition to how you deal with little sisters, the game's ending will depend on how you deal with certain antagonists. Grace is one of them. What I find fascinating is how the introduction to this type of decision is with a character that Subject Delta has already wronged. As the player, while we embody Delta, we become aware that his hands aren't clean. He's hurt people. Yes, he was made that way in the past, but right now, Subject Delta gets to choose the person he is today. Grace's anger towards you is understandable. She's been burned before. It makes sense she believes all big daddies are just monsters with drills strapped to their arms. You can prove her right if you want, but you can also do the opposite. Grab the key and leave. If you do that, Grace is in disbelief. She can't believe you didn't act the way she expected. And this gets her to reconsider if you're really the beast Sophia Lamb paints you out to be. Grace is not a monster ravaged by Adam and the promise of Rapture, but a woman who's gone through a lot, and one who just needed someone to show her the compassion she was owed, which is enough to help you out when leaving the level. And with that, we make our way to Dionysus Park, another step closer to reaching Eleanor. Actually, psych, turns out a priest named Father Wales won't be having any of that and launches a torpedo guided by the Holy Spirit. It destroys our ship, and it looks like we'll be making our way to Siren's Alley, a place that was once a high-class quarter of Rapture. When the city fell on hard times, it became a red light district, with people selling themselves to get by. This place is home to our two antagonists, the already mentioned Father Wales and his brother Daniel. These guys will be dealt with as the level progresses, so I'd like to take this time to finally discuss our main villain and Father Wales's higher-up, Sophia Lamb. If there was an underlying comparison between the villains of Bioshock 1 and 2, it would be the extremes of power. Andrew Ryan and the city of Rapture was the embodiment of objectivism pushed to its extreme. It was a system that would allow the great to do whatever they pleased. Meanwhile, Sophia Lamb is the inverse. Her power doesn't come from selfishness, but rather a sort of weaponized compassion. Sophia is a collectivist, a person who believes the needs of the group are more important than the individual. And hearing her audio logs and the way she talks, it seems like she genuinely believes it. When she came to Rapture, Lamb put her altruistic ideas into practice, offering free therapy for the civilians in Pauper's Drop, getting a genuine rush from learning who needed money the most in a poker game, then losing to them intentionally so they would be alright financially, and turning her home in Dionysus Park into a place artists could live together. She put her money where her mouth was. Meanwhile, Andrew Ryan is watching her do this, and it's like watching someone hacksaw your great chain and make it out of compassion and love for your fellow man and linking arms. In other words, hell. At the time, Ryan was the head honcho of Rapture, but Lamb got under his skin enough that they even had public debates. But even with facts and logic on his side, Lamb proved a worthy rival. And while this battle of wills was going on, she gave birth to a daughter named Eleanor. On the outset, Sophia Lamb doesn't sound so bad. In fact, she sounds really selfless. But here's where that starts to get a bit muddied. Sophia Lamb wanted her daughter to be her successor, to continue her work when she's gone. And to do that, she treated her like a sheltered child. Eleanor was kept away from the other children. She wasn't allowed to have friends or bonds. The mission was too important. Much like Andrew Ryan, Sophia Lamb is an extremist to her cause, and a hypocrite too, because Sophia's whole outlook is based on altruism and the collective joy of the group. Yet she tries to achieve this by actively taking the life of her daughter and molding it into something greater than she could ever be. Her daughter would be a utopian. They tried it before. It didn't work out. But with Eleanor, it had to. But consider the hypocrisy in that. The success of the group, the most important thing, will be dictated by a single individual. Even if they are presented as a messiah, there's a contradiction to have one person be the will of the group. When I first played Bioshock 2, I just saw Sophia Lamb as, oh, cult leader, got it. But this fresh playthrough showed me there's more to her, and it made me have an appreciation for this antagonist. Getting older helped me realize what the team was trying to do with these antagonists, and I think it works. It also adds to the overall quality as a whole. Bioshock 2 shows the passage of time. Ryan is gone, Fontaine too. Most of the greatest minds have left or kept to themselves, and in that absence, Sophia Lamb has the perfect opportunity to rise to power. Ryan used self-interest to build this city. Sophia weaponizes compassion for the big picture. It only could have been possible when the captains of industry left the frame. That's why she wants to stop you, not from personal malice, but because you're getting in the way of that goal. Eleanor was never meant to be a little sister. It wasn't part of the plan. That ambush at the start of the game was her chance at course correction. It had nothing to do with you. But she'll do anything she can to make sure you fail, even in spite of what her daughter wants. After you deal with the whales, she destroys the pumps, flooding you in the alley. But you're a big daddy, so it's whatever. And with that, we head to Dionysus Park, where another of these moral quandaries will eventually kick in. Sinclair shares that this place suddenly flooded one night, chalked up as cultist work. Coral and plant life is spaced across the level, giving a cool organic flavor to this place. Our main contact in the level is Stanley Poole, journalist for the Rapture Tribune. He's got the station locked down, and the only way to get it back to normal is burying a story he doesn't want leaked to Lamb. The objective is to deal with the Little Sisters however we choose, this level being the only one where this is the main focus, giving the incentive to look around any nook and cranny you choose. But no matter how you deal with them, you start to learn more about Stan, more than he would like. As a way of making conversation, he mentions the file he dug up on Delta for a story. Turns out you found the city in a dive suit back in the day. It even led to you getting the nickname Johnny Topside. And Ryan, once again, being an incredibly cool dude, got paranoid you were a spy and turned you into a big daddy so you wouldn't talk. With a comment like this, Stanley seems like a pal, or at least an ally of circumstance. At first. Remember how he wants you to bury a story by dealing with the sisters? Well, Adam's got a talent for painting the truth clear as day. You'll catch memories of the moments, revealing a couple of things. First off, when he infiltrated the group for Ryan, he ended up trying to ruin Lamb. Doesn't sound so bad. But it was to a young Eleanor. When she confronted him about it, he freaked out and turned her over to become a little sister. That's why she disappeared from Grace and how she ended up in your care. And finally, when it became too much and he worried the others would tell Sophia, he flooded the park. And all the while, as you piece together this story, Stan is none the wiser, until Sophia Lamb chimes in and drops a bombshell. She knew what he had done the whole time, and let him scorn for years. But the moment it became about Eleanor, she wouldn't have it. So she says to you, her opponent, to do what you please with Stan. Also, he ratted you out to Ryan. Have fun, Delta. Moral choice number 2. Do you let the man who turned your daughter figure and you into monstrosities live? With Grace, you had wronged her. You were the perpetrator, so it may have been easier to try and be sympathetic to her. With Stanley, he has wronged you. Will you turn the other cheek, or will you bury him in the park he's been trapped in for years? It may not accomplish much, but it could feel pretty good for a few seconds. Eleanor expresses her desire for revenge as well, but however you proceed, it's time to move ahead and reach our destination, Fontaine Futuristics. Eleanor's further below, but before then, Bioshock 2 has what I would consider to be one of its best levels in store for you. In the original, Fort Frolic was seen as one of the game's best. It's a level that feels self-contained, providing a unique story with the artist Sander Cohen, and a cool district to explore to your heart's content. Fontaine Futuristics has a similar structure, but does that with all the add-ons on Bioshock 2, making for a unique and surreal level. Let's start with the narrative hook. Our goal is to make it further in. Just before we enter the building, we get a message from our helper in this place, Gilbert Alexander. Or at least the Gilbert Alexander of October 9th, 1967. He's left pre-recorded messages to help anyone who reached this point. So we've got another underwater sequence, building up the expectation of this place. See the message written in what looks like a laser rather than blood, and meet this futuristics boss. A security bot going by the name Alex the Great. Wait, what? Yep, that's right. Our antagonist is also Gilbert Alexander, the present version of him. Years ago, Gilbert was one of the head scientists of Rapture, taking over the Big Daddy project after Suchong's demise. He's the one who got credited for the pair bonding of the Alpha series, which worked so well that anytime a little sister was dealt with, an Alpha series would stop working. Here's an account from the man himself.
Either way, the trauma proved too much for the bonded protectors, resulting in unreasoning rage or coma. We can harness their suicidal aggression as foot soldiers, but no more, I'm afraid. Today I saw one kneeling near a gatherer's garden and crying.
As the years passed after the Civil War, the guilt gets to Alexander and he joins up with Sophia Lamb, convinced to become the test subject in an experiment of his own making. Adam is the building block of Rapture, each carrying a piece of DNA to those in contact with it, similar to what you experienced in Dionysus Park with Stanley. Gilbert's plan was to be drenched in the genetic material of all the members of the Rapture family to become the first utopian, the first being created with the good of all in mind, bearing no selfish desires. The experiment was a failure, and now the man is insane. That security bot is his closest link to the facility. So the plan is to take down the present Gilbert Alexander and get his genetic code, allowing access in the lower parts of the facility with the assistance of Gilbert Alexander from the past. That's pretty wacky, but also cool, so let's do it. Our goal is to find the 4 signal relays across the map, then confront the Big Cheese himself. In a lot of ways, Fontaine Futuristics feels like a spiritual successor to Fort Frolic. Both are the 7th level in the game that feature an objective meant to get you exploring, rather than a linear structure. Both have a unique narrative to the others, and they also feature an emphasis on the Art Deco look of Rapture. Most of Bioshock 2 has highlighted the decay of the city and features a lot of makeshift creations through levels. While this place has its share of ruin, it also seems more like the Rapture in the first game than the second. There's open spaces that show off the grandeur of this place, like the entrance that functions as your introduction to the Alpha series enemies. While you explore, the sense of place is a potent one. This location was a big deal in the lore of Rapture. And now you're exploring it after Ryan shut it down and Alex brought it back on. You could even find a portrait of Fontaine and his family. Remember when this guy was a big deal? That feels like a lifetime ago. Subject Delta gets a strange homecoming with his creation as well. There's this plasmid showcase where Alex informs him that plasmids were made possible because the Alpha series were the ones who tested them out, and then has to prove he's still got it in a performance with opponents. But the level hits its crescendo right near the end, after you shut down the bots and journey to Fontaine Plasmid and Research. The place is covered in darkness and bulbs of Adam. When you hit the switch, you get a glimpse of the man himself, and it's a surreal one. This is what's left over of Gilbert Alexander, an enlarged test sample in a vat of Adam. To lure him out, we need to collect some flowers the sea slugs ingest. When we do so and defeat all the enemies, we grab the plants and the final antagonist choice presents itself. And I think it's the most difficult one. As what remains of Gilbert Alexander sits in the vat, we have the option to pull a lever, creating a shock that will kill him, or just let him stay there for the rest of his remaining life. The pre-recorded message asks for oblivion, but the present begs to live. He wasn't the greatest person, but who is? He's a scientist that wanted to push the bounds of humanity, who got inspired by Sophia Lamb. An audio log also suggests there was more to it than just inspiration.
The genius of Sophia Lamb is a thing of empathy, a profound moral sense. I can only describe her as a kind of secular saint. But dividing her loyalty evenly across the world at large spreads it so thin as to be invisible to some. Love, I have found, is beneath her. Naturally, Ryan arrested her, gave her to Sinclair to incarcerate somewhere. But upon her escape, she took the city and changed my life forever.
The last great act he did was willingly turn himself into something that could lead the Rapture family into a new age. And the last thing as a person was to guarantee his own oblivion for the love of his fellow human. He doesn't want Eleanor to become what he has. If he dies, she'll be safe. That's a noble idea. But I find myself considering that the Gilbert who helped us is already dead. What's left over is a scared, helpless being that doesn't know any better. He can't hurt anyone now. But is it right to end his life while he's trying so hard to cling to it? It's the hardest choice morally, and I can see it going either way. I even second-guessed my choice, walked back into the room to be sure if I was making the right one. I wasn't, and I'm still not. But regardless, we head to the detention facility Persephone, the final 2 levels of the game. Homestretch. Persephone and the intersections are the final levels of the game. It's an ending that I think works a lot better than the original, but it does so under some qualifications. The game has been building to the moment where you find Eleanor, and they choose to present a reveal as a sort of twist. The twist that she restored you to life and has been seeing your every action as gospel. This is what decides the ending you get, and you only find out when it's too late. How you deal with the little sisters and antagonists will decide the outlook Eleanor will follow, as it comes from the one person who loved her for her. Instead of a good option and a bad option, there are actually 3 options: good, neutral, and evil, with 2 variations each, giving a surprising amount of differences on how Eleanor interprets your actions. Mechanically, I think this is a cool way to deliver a twist, revealing that you are the moral compass of your daughter, and having to explore the rest of it, seeing what would live on after you do. However, besides the interesting revelation it has to your choices, I find myself just thinking, okay, neat. And that's because I don't feel an emotional connection to Eleanor, the daughter figure we've been looking for all this time. I understand why the character does, but as a player, the twist in the first game had a much stronger emotional impact that affects you. Because Fontaine didn't just trick Jack, he tricks you too. You fell for his sob story, you do his dirty work, and it feels like you were betrayed when Fontaine reveals himself, declaring Atlas wasn't real. When I saw Eleanor, I didn't feel anything. But that doesn't mean the level isn't great overall. Sophia will smother Eleanor, stopping her heart and starting your countdown. What follows is seeing through the eyes of a little sister, acting like a tour through a world you never experienced, finding the pieces of a big sister suit for Eleanor, then escape captivity and raise some hell, frantically accomplishing objectives one after another in hopes of escape. I don't have much to say about this finale. I like it better than the original's ending, as this is what we've been building up to. You get a plasmid that summons Eleanor as a combat buddy, which is cool. I like how before Delta bites the dust, you get to see the person Eleanor is from your actions. Even the fate of Sophia Lamb is out of your control, depending on Eleanor, which is pretty neat. You say goodbye to Sinclair, which has some fun irony to it. The very thing that guaranteed him power is the place he becomes a big daddy. A bummer you have to kill him though. But that's kind of it. It's a decent way of capping off the game. As the two ascend towards the surface, we'll be leaving Subject Delta and Eleanor to their fates. Because our trip through Rapture isn't over yet. Minerva's Den is the final piece to the Rapture story. It's an expansion that's about a few hours long, taking all the bits of Bioshock 2 and refining it into an experience with a fantastic narrative. The head for the project was Steve Gaynor, serving as lead designer and writer, tasked with 9 other developers to make this piece of downloadable content. An interesting note for this creation was him considering the constraints of the project as a blessing in disguise, allowing an opportunity for more creative risks. As Gaynor is quoted in an interview,
"It has to be as organic as possible, and when someone has something that's not necessarily their primary responsibility, but they have a passion for it and ideas for it, like, I want to try to shape the art in this one part even though I'm a level designer, I think you have to take advantage of that."
And at least personally, I think that risk paid off. Minerva's Den hits different from Bioshock 2. Even Kevin Levine, creator of Bioshock 1 and Infinite, loves this expansion. But chances are, you may not have played it. If you look on Steam and click Minerva's Den for the remastered version of the game, there are only 530 reviews for it, and 390 for the original. And I certainly don't blame you for that. Heck, I only played the first time years ago. That was the section I mentioned in the beginning of this video. So if you haven't played Minerva's Den yet, I highly recommend stop this video and give it a shot. If anything about these games I mentioned sounds like your thing and you want to play it, you owe it to yourself to experience this on your terms. But if curiosity is getting the better of you, then fair enough. Let's rock. Minerva's Den focuses on Subject Sigma, a big daddy with a mission: to enter the computer core of Rapture and obtain blueprints for the Thinker, a supercomputer capable of making thousands of computations in seconds. Though not everyone is on board with this plan, which introduces us to our main antagonist, Reed Wall, one of the scientists who worked on the machine, developing an unhealthy obsession thanks to a paranoid nature and atoms circulating his body. But it's not all doom and gloom. We've got a valuable ally on our side, and that's Reed's former colleague, Charles Milton Porter. It's your goal to explore Minerva's Den with Porter's help, extract the Thinker, and head back to the surface. This expansion is about 3 levels, 2 large ones featuring 3 little sisters each, and the last being the climax, wrapping up the expansion. The first 2 are extremely solid levels. What I think this comes down to is its pacing, mechanically and narratively. Gameplay-wise, it's like you're playing through the best parts of Bioshock 2 with some fun additions. Your first gun is an ion laser that has a unique feel to the other guns. The closest comparison is the chemical thrower in the first game, but this combined with 2's dual wielding makes it feel more slick, for lack of a better word. When you find more weapons, some are upgraded versions, which gives you an additional incentive to explore and plenty of different ammo types to play around with. I also think it's pretty cute the game starts you with telekinesis. It makes Subject Sigma feel different from Delta. The DLC features all of the plasmids with the exception of Summon Eleanor from the base game, but it throws in a cool one in its place: Gravity Well. This bad boy pulls objects and enemies towards it, making it easier to hit groups with area damage. It's also used to unlock special locks by throwing it over the opening to another room. The enemies in Minerva's Den are pretty interesting as well. They almost feel like remixes of 2's enemies. You have brute splicers that shoot fire, Houdini splicers that think that frost is a superior projectile, and the one I thought was fun, splicers in lab coats using security bots in combat. They did this in the base game too, but I like how the constant use gives this place its own flavor combat-wise. Even in this dystopia, a scientist is going to put their degree to use. In addition to Lancer Big Daddies, who don lasers as well, kick off the fight by creating a flash that can disorient you. The different enemies and speedy pacing gives Minerva's Den its own flavor of Bioshock that I really enjoy. It's like a lean, refined version of 2, and I love it so much for that. But besides its gameplay, it's the story of Minerva's Den that is the standout. The focused and smaller length of this makes the story feel more personal and hit harder. If you remembered, my problem with 2 was that with the exception of the moments talked about, I didn't connect with Subject Delta and Eleanor. But here, I grew really fond of the voice on the radio, CM Porter. I was reading an interview from Gaynor that Porter is the heart of this experience, and I completely agree with that. The game does such a good job at letting you empathize with this guy. Because compared to all the great minds in Rapture, Porter is just a scientist who cares about his creation. He's not vying for power, he's not hurting others, he just wants to create for the joy of progress. There's even an audio log responding to Sophia Lamb's invitation to the Rapture family that I found really endearing.
Dear Dr. Lamb, I received the invitation to your little social club today. In return, I'd like to make you a wager. I wager you need Rapture Central Computing just a little bit more than I need your half-baked metaphysical mumbo-jumbo. Ideal in science, not whatever it is you're up to. You keep out of Minerva's Den, and I'll keep this city's automation from grinding to a complete and sudden halt. Sound fair?
The audio work for Porter is so good. His actor Carl Lumbey does such a wonderful job at bringing this character to life. Also, it totally blew my mind that he's the same guy who played Dixon in Alias, which is... wow, what a beautiful coincidence. But there's another part of Porter that makes him so heartbreakingly earnest. Porter was married for a time to a woman named Pearl, but during World War II, with the London bombardments, Pearl was killed. Pain and grief brought Porter to Rapture, where he buried himself in work. But with the Thinker evolving, it led Porter to an interesting development. As the machine gained sentience, Porter began treating the Thinker like a friend. He started to humanize the machine, even feeding it data as a way of bringing back Pearl in his own way. Hearing the sound of her voice again made him happy. Meanwhile, his partner Reed Wall was completely against the idea. He began believing that the machine could tell the future with a sort of prediction equation. The fact Porter meant to make it something less was foolish, so he stabbed Porter in the back. With the machine, he replicated Porter's voice, swearing allegiance to Fontaine and dropping that evidence on Ryan's doorstep. Ryan, once again, being the incredibly cool guy he is, got terrified and had Porter arrested. Now he speaks to us. We have no idea where he is. But at least his work will live on if we're successful. Porter and Dr. Tenenbaum made a sort of deal. With the help of a decommissioned Big Daddy named Subject Sigma, they could get the Thinker's prints, recreate him on the surface, and reverse the effects of Adam, something Tenenbaum has been studying and making some progress with. But with the Thinker, the kinks could get ironed out permanently. I may not be doing this story justice, but eventually we make it to the core. Wall is dead, and all that's left is to confirm our genetic makeup.
Confirming user's genetic identity. Genetic identity confirmed. Alpha series, subject Sigma. Former identity, Charles Milton Porter.
Welcome back, Milton.
System ending personality duplication. Subject, Charles Milton Porter.
You are Porter. When Ryan's goons were closing in, Porter, realizing he was done for and becoming a Big Daddy, created the Rapture Departure Protocol, a plan that would make sure his creation and closest friend could live on, away from the city. But the Thinker had other plans. He never forgot about Porter, so he and Tenenbaum were in agreement. Subject Sigma, formerly Charles Milton Porter, would be the man for the job. If the Thinker was leaving Rapture, Porter would too. And you've done it. Reed has been dealt with. There's no more splicers to fight. What follows is a victory lap. Your victory lap. After one last audio log, you get a quiet walk from Porter's apartment to his private bathysphere, with Tenenbaum already inside. It's a moment that allows you to reflect on this experience, but also works as your personal goodbye to the city itself. Much like how the bathysphere brought you into Rapture, it's what will bring you back home again, too. Minerva's Den is so good throughout, but this moment is my personal favorite part, maybe in the entire series. The quiet, melancholic goodbye is just the perfect way to see off the player, and maybe for you, the viewer. This moment also served as the template for the first game Gaynor and his team would create in the Fulbright company, Gone Home. Small world, right? I love this moment so much. You spend plenty of time in Rapture, and the fact your final moments loop back to that very first game is perfect. You've seen the city, and now it's time to move on. And it's a strong reason why I think the story of Rapture should end here. More Bioshock could be cool, but how it wraps up here has me satisfied. Also, I have one last thing of note, and it's for you. Excuse me for 1 second, please. Aw, sweet! Gotta work it! I didn't have the heart to say goodbye in person, so I hope this will do. I made this video after losing someone I was close to. It was my way of carrying on. It's been a blast! But along the way, I began to wonder, will I be remembered? I wanted to visit Rapture again and play both games, because I was curious how they held up. But seeing the passage of time in this place reminded me that all things end. And that got me wondering if I'll be the same. Will I be forgotten, like Bioshock 2, like Minerva's Den, and like the man who made this city in the first place? Will the things I make be remembered? Will this video? Or will it lie at the bottom of a sea of content? I don't know. But what I do know is that as long as someone's on the other side, no matter how much time passes, that is real. So, thank you for making that possible. I hope you've enjoyed the trip. Feel free to share your thoughts on it. Good, bad, whatever you think. That bathysphere should take you right back up to the surface. You go on ahead. I'll take the next one. This may be a goodbye to Rapture, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. A goodbye is just a prelude to another hello. Come back whenever you'd like, and until then, smile when you can, drink plenty of water, and take care of yourself. Goodbye, viewer, and goodbye, Rapture.